Welcome to the Stark Over Podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is a show where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. Recording on Sunday. It's been an interesting day. I've had a tough weekend of playtesting, literally Friday, Saturday, Sunday of playtesting. I didn't even go out. I had other things that went on to stop me from going out on Friday to go to my local venue, but oh man, lots of work getting ready for World Cup. So today, like I said, since the World Cup stuff is real demanding, I'm just going to be talking about primarily until World Cup gets over is what's in your head and those sorts of elements. Just because, buddy, if I could only tell you what all the stuff that I've been working on for like the last month, it would boggle your brain. So anyway, but before we really get into it, I still have open casting or open recruiting for Phoenix Nest. If you are interested in joining the team, just let you know it's going to be 5 hours a week of interaction and tutelage, and probably about a year before you become a full member. But I need people that are going to rock tournaments, super queues, that is, and able to go to World Cup or the World Championships. Preference will be given to those who are able to go to both. And at most, I'm picking up 2 people. So I've already had some folks apply. If that discourages you, then please don't apply. If that's like, yeah, I want to compete for that, then go ahead and apply. Do understand that this is work. Like, just saying. But you got to have a passion for heroclix if you want to be in on the team. There are perks, lots of perks, mainly in which you'll get tons of information before they're ever on the podcast, or even get custom information before other people hear it or don't hear it at all. And you get to hear all sorts of weird tales from the land of Dark Logos. So, all right. Also, you get to buy a cool Phoenix Nest shirt and look awesome at a tournament. There you go. All right. So let's go ahead and get into today's show. Today's show is going to be about expectations and debriefing. Expectations, debriefing. And the main reason that this has come up is I tell everybody, like I study pickup artist stuff, and everybody writes debriefs, in the pickup artist community and stuff. And so my wingman, he's like, we need to get serious. We need to get really serious. We need to go and debrief after we go out. Well, and half the time when we go out, my main goal is just to talk to people and get phone numbers and potentially get some dates, which sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes I'm really lucky that those numbers were flakes when I interact with them later. But the cool part about debriefing is that you start to understand your good points, the points that your wingman or your teammates, whoever, observed about you, and other little things that you thought you were doing that you weren't doing, and things that you are doing that you didn't know that you were doing, and the things that you tried or went out to set to test that worked or didn't work. And that's the real huge thing about debriefing. So let's sort of break that down and why that's important with expectations first, and then going into elaboration on a debrief. Expectations sets your focus for the night. It's almost like a living hypothesis, whether you're going out to play heroclix, or you're going to go talk to people, or you're going to, run tests on a new invention that you have. Expectations allow you to sort of say, within realistic parameters, this is what should happen. Not what is going to happen. This is what should happen. These things should occur. I should have these results. These are the type of people that should respond to this. These are the type of people that shouldn't respond to this. And so whatever you're going through, your expectations start you off. Now, expectations are different than hypothesis, okay, or hypothesis. The main reason why expectations are different than hypotheses is that you're always starting with a hypothesis with just like, I don't know. I'm just throwing something random in the wind before I test. Usually with expectations, you already have some sort of general framework that you've seen with some level of evidence. And then you've already crafted something to deal with your initial hypothesis. So you're down the stage of knowledge just a little bit, down the scientific method just a little bit, and what you're at is in that active testing stage. Well, you're right before that active testing stage, or you can even say your reprisal of your active testing stage. Now, depending on how broad your definition of hypothesis is and how you're applying in your specific field of using the scientific method, then you could say hypothesis and expectation are synonymous. But for all intents and purposes, let's just say it's not. Okay? So, let's, as we're going on, our expectations say a lot about us. The first thing our expectations tell us is how big or how small our view is. That's a huge thing, because many times I've learned my view when it comes to heroclix is either too wide or too narrow. So let me elaborate on that as I drink my water. The first thing that I've noticed is usually I will get caught up in a trend. And the trend, let's just say the trend is don't die tech. And I'll obsess and obsess and obsess about the trend to the point where it gets insane. And I'll spend all day focusing on that trend. The most recent trend that I spent way too much time on was Highfather with Omega Greed and all of that. I just hated that so bad. But with Highfather and Omega Greed, eventually things came about where, because I was focused so specifically on that, I got completely blindsided by Faust and a few other things that were outside of that needle nose, point thing. But then you have things like just don't die, those are very specific. But then when you go into like a larger trend of just like, oh my gosh, OMAs, oh my gosh, 4-figure teams. What about this? What about that? What about these other things? The implications of entities. If anybody goes back and reads up or listens to that podcast, the implications of entities and how entities reduce the point value of characters that you actually could play. And eventually you have so many entities that it equals another character. So you almost get diminishing returns in a 300 point meta. That is. So, sort of rewinding. So there's these points in times where I'm like, oh my gosh, this huge concept. Yeah, how do I defeat this huge concept that the common heroclix player or the meta player is going after? The other side again is this one specific thing that just seems stupid level strong, that I'm just like, I gotta beat it. If I don't beat it, I'm gonna lose to it. So those are issues. But when you sort of like throw both of them into the pot, the big view and the small view, and you're like, okay, I expect to see these results on a macro scale and these results on a micro scale, and somewhere in between I should see something like this. It's a lot easier. So let's say you have X team and you're going to apply this mindset like this. I expect that this team on average should be able to have a 60 to 70% chance against 90% of the teams that I face. And the teams that I'm going to have any sort of difficulty with are going to be extremely niche teams that on average most players aren't going to play. Then I recognize on the transition level in between the big and the small, I might have issues with actions. I might have issues with tempo, which might make it a little bit rough. But with that, I also have options and flexibility. Then going on to the micro level is, okay, is X figures performing well, or did I see Z figure and D figure end up causing me problems when playing the team? So what happens is the expectations are that I'm going to deal with a general issue where I should be able to deal with the majority of the meta. I expect that I'm going to have probably some action problems. And then I'm looking specifically for other little things that I think are going to be hiccups, but let's see if I can adapt for it. So let's just say, all right, I go and I play and I test and I see that, well, all right, my team only really solves for 40% of the meta, which isn't good. But I didn't have a tempo problem, and the figures that I thought were minor problems or might cause me hiccups were actually major problems. Okay? So then that allows me to come back and say, oh, okay, that's some interesting information. So I have my information and I sort of, document it. And then I can move on back if I'm going to test again. And then just repeat the process. And after I do my tweaks, go back, reset my expectations, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. Boom. All right. Now you're going to the point in which you're finished. So we're going to start talking about the debrief element of it. The point of the debrief is for you and another individual, preferably individuals, to get together, share experiences, and to get people that you respect their insights view on what happened. And it has multiple benefits. When I was doing chaplaincy training, one thing is every day for the chaplain that was on duty the previous night, we had debrief. And so that chaplain had to tell everybody else in the room, including our bosses, what happened, what they did, how the patient interacted with their care, how did they emotionally process the situation, because you're dealing with people, delivering babies, accidents, folks shot, people dying. It's really stressful. Yeah, it's really stressful. I'm not gonna lie. So because of that, you had to admit things that you normally didn't want to admit. Or I could think of a couple that I can't say right now because there's kids that listen. But I've seen people in positions that I never want to see people. And it's just like, ooh. And then I had to tell, my boss how it felt to see a person in that situation, and what I did with the patient, what I did with the family, how I handled police, how I handled, fire department, how I handled the nurses, work with the nurses and all this other stuff. Okay. So there's a lot. And so I remember distinctly in one instance, oh buddy, that it was interesting because my boss sort of called me out, and he said, Edward, was the true matter of the fact that, you being in this situation gave you this feeling. And for right now, we'll just say this feeling of power, which wasn't it, but we'll just say it's a feeling of power, and that you felt odd that you had a feeling of power in the middle of this sort of devastating situation. And I'm like, not really. But when I had to reflect on it, I'm like, I sort of did, but that's not the feeling that I wanted to have. Okay. So debrief allows you to assess a lot of different things, because I know a lot of folks will be like, heroclix, pure logic and luck. That's not it. That's like the surface level of heroclix. There is a lot of emotional processing. There is a lot of personality processing. I know that firsthand from coaching. I know that firsthand from running a team. I know that firsthand from working with peers. Okay, there is a lot of emotional processing. There are teams that could win tournaments that S-class players will never play because they have some sort of dissonance with that team. I dealt with it today. It's even more frustrating if you're on the builder category and you spend 2 to 3 hours building a team, and then you're like, nope, this won't work for the player. After all said and done, the player's just like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. One of the frustrating things for me running the team at times is my own defensive mindset can sometimes, and I'm very convincing. I'm very convincing. My defensive mindset will sometimes create hybrids that will cause this separation with the team members, because as they're coming for me for help, my paranoia comes out. Like, again, defensive player, basis and paranoia. Offensive player, let me beat the crap out of you. Shenanigans player, I'm smarter than you. Let me show you why. I know they're purely looking at that from a vice perspective, but it makes the most amount of sense. But when I'm looking at this and I'm trying to help folks, I'm like, I hurt inside because I can't play this. But again, I have to step aside and I'm like, all right, this person is a shenanigans player. Let's just put out all the control crap that we can. Let's make the other person on the other side of the field have the worst time of heroclix possible. That's our goal right there. My opponent will have the worst time playing heroclix. That's our victory right now. Okay. So there's times I have to surrender to that. At the other end, there's times where I'm just like, no, you got to do this or else you're going to get wrecked. So the goal, not always what happens, is to sort of get something that's a little bit more complete, push the player a little bit, grow the player a little bit, but also sort of keep them in what they're great at, not just what they're good at, what they're great at. So when we come back to that debrief element, because I know I'm definitely expecting a debrief call here soon. When you come back to that debrief element, you start to see like, okay, where did the intellectual and emotional dissonance come in? And sometimes it's not there. Sometimes it is there. Another element that I've learned that comes from debrief, you start to be able to understand your competition in relation to you. Now, this is important, and for those who didn't listen to the podcast, like I think it's almost a year ago, maybe a little more than that, talking about the real number 1, 2, and 3 in a venue and the fake number 1, 2, 3 in a venue, go back and listen to that, because what will end up happening is during a heavy tournament, you can start to see on a larger scale where you sit at, where your opponents sit at, the distance between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7, 8 and 9, and so on. Okay, you're able to see that distance. And the one thing that's interesting is just sort of like a bracket, the separation between 9 and 16 really, majority of times, isn't that much. The distance between 5 and 8 is really even more minuscule. 1 through 4, 9 times out of 10, I usually say they're about equal, with 1 being like a hair above number 2. And most folks will be like, well, Dark Logos, isn't that a, disservice to the rankings and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, not really. Because if you look at it, 9 through 16, while they performed well, were not able to overcome those in top 8. Just through build or situations or luck or whatever else. But to also understand this, 16th may not be that far off in skill or experience or team building than 4th place, but there might be a step or two from 16 in 1st place. Okay. That's what you start to have to see in your debrief. And I coach players, watch games, watch high level games. And I've got to get back into that habit. I usually do that habit whenever there is a rock tournament where the top 16 is played. I always sit there and I break down players, and sort of like some old coach watching football film. And I'm be like, yep, you see what he did there? You see what Rob Barazul did there? Yep. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that. Okay, so let's go and look at the move again. Why did he do that? Okay, what is the situation he's dealing with? Blah, 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 blah. What's the amount of pressure that's on the map? This, and this. Let's look at that decision. Boom, the decision. Is the decision sound? Yes, the decision sound. Let's look at the roll. The roll didn't hit. Let's say the roll did hit. What would have happened? Blah, 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 blah. What's the odds of that happening? Blah, 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 blah. You start to see what goes on is that if you're looking at that tape or you're looking at that game and you're starting to realize this cat's making decisions and seeing things that I didn't see, but by watching him, I see that, you start to understand the distance between him and you. And that is huge. A lot of people don't do that. Now, the next part of it, and this is another part that I have to work with folks with. Just because there's distance does not make you inferior. Doesn't make you inferior. What it shows is the types of work and skill that you have to apply to bring yourself up. A lot of times people will say, like, I compare myself to other people and then I feel crappy because I'm not as good as them and then I don't want to try. And really, when you start comparing yourself to other people, there's all sorts of negative things that happen because you'll be like, I'm not as good as them and I'm not as talented as them and they have more money to buy heroclix and, you know, I got a family and I can't do this, or I'm a college student and I can't do that, and I have a good job but my job keeps me busy so I can't play as much even though I got the money, blah, 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 blah. Everybody keeps looking at, oh, you know, woe is me, and trust me, I have my moments like that too. But when you come back and you say, like, all right, what can I gain? What can I compensate for my shortcoming in this, my shortcoming in that? You start to see, like, oh, okay, can I work on that? And that's another thing about debriefing that's good, is that the people around you can say, this is a point that you need to be mindful of, but focus on this first, or focus on what you see as a major problem and then move on to develop these other areas as you see fit. So you start getting a sense of priority. Okay. And that fosters growth. The one thing I respect about Easton and Patrick in particular, they had a intent of traveling and testing different things to expose their strengths and weaknesses of them as a player so that they're able to develop something better to get to that next step. Okay. And I think a lot of people underestimate that. Some people just think, like, well, you just go a bunch of rocks and you become real good and, you know, then you win. And it's like, no, that's really not it. I know that firsthand, that you just don't go to a bunch of rocks and then you win big. It just doesn't go like that. There's disciplines involved. If there's money invested, there's disciplines involved. So there's elements there. There's a lot of elements there to consider. But what happens is when you start going against different competition, you can start to see, like, placement in this area is a little bit weaker than the other area, but team building is better, or clock management, action management are you know, better or worse than another in different locations. The meta is this type of meta. You know, the meta is, you know, shifted towards around this figure and that figure. They really don't consider, you know, B and H, but they're very focused on X and A. Okay, so cool. That allows me to shift my mindset, and then I can see how those combinations of understanding apply put that back inside of my big, huge meta cauldron, stir the pot, and then say, all right, because of everything I've seen, what is most likely to appear out? Okay. And then you start talking to your buddies during debrief, and then they can start, saying to you like, all right, if we test this, what are we expecting? And then, okay, now we tested it. All right, this is really what happened. Another good example of this is Kenny Pena's Avengers theme team using the round table. He showed tech wise that a team like that using the Avengers team base can win, which Avengers team base, in all honesty, is like the second worst team base in all of team basedom. Next, and right on the bottom is the X-Men team base. Okay. It's right there down at the bottom for most people. But what did he see that allowed him to sort of come up and like, maybe I can do this? Okay. Well, you have mechanics in play. He had the, Captain America that can move the team base. He had the round table that could give the team base powers on top of the asset dial that can give the team base powers. He was able to pop off certain figures that serve specific utilities. So there's a lot of different elements there that were considered that most people may have overlooked. Okay. So when we come back and we have some more analysis, it's like, okay, initially he had to convince his friends and his teammates that this was a good team. And they tested it. And then when they broke it down, they're like, yeah, shoot, this is a good team. And he eventually won a Super Q. So where does that again put us at? It puts us in this point where we're able in the debrief to take this extrapolated evidence and extrapolated information and then start to compile it into our final workings of our tech, into the final workings of whatever we're going to play for the tournament or preparing ourselves for the future, landmarks that we need to get to as a player or as a person. And so then it's up to us to act on that. The frustrating thing that I've had as a teacher in life, from all the jobs that I've had as a teacher, is when clearly I see the potential for the student to do, give all the means for the student to do, and they do nothing. That is the most frustrating thing, because it's no longer an issue of application. It's no longer an issue of materials. It's no longer an issue of means. It becomes an issue of attitude. And I see on message boards a lot about this whole like, oh, but I saw the team and I had the figures, but I just thought it was cheese. But I really wanted to win. I saw what I needed to do, but that's just work. I know I needed to practice on placement, but who has time for that? I know I need to do practice games, but I don't know anybody on the interwebs. There's a lot of excuses. And I look at like very simple things that people can do, but they're just like, meh, I'm not going to do that. But you have the means and the ability. Meh, I'm not going to do that. I use Creation Matrix to practice, not going to front. I used to look for maps and dig out heroclix and put them out and hope I have what my friend has. And if not, I'm proxying figures and I'm sitting there hunched over on my mom's kitchen table and looking at stuff. And I'm like, oh, my back hurts, my butt hurts, everything hurts. And then I'm just like, man, I need to play this stuff online. And then I started doing that and I'm like, yup, not going back to taking all this crap out. It is frustrating. If anybody from Creation Matrix is listening, give me something like a little size thing for a colossal. I need that, a 3x6, because I play colossals sometimes for playtesting, or for fun, really. I play with my Zombie Galactus online. Anyway, I need a 3x6, but anyway it goes. I go and just, play test, and folks don't realize you don't need to even have the figures. You just need to have HC Realms up and Creation Matrix, and then boom, you're good to go. You can look at just about any map, and you're golden. And, if you need to just sit there and study and practice, you can. Oh, you need a heroclix buddy to practice with? There's tons of folks that you can talk to on HC Realms in the Strategies and Tactics forum, or even the Play It by the Post forum of, what to do and what's going on and their thoughts and whatever. You can find people to play against. So the issue really comes down to, are you going to put in work? That's really it. Now, again, for me, I think it all sort of hit home more so for me recently after reading The Good to Great about discipline being the number one characteristics of companies that went good to great, that the people on the lower end had discipline, the people on the higher end had discipline, the executives had discipline. But they also had passion with their discipline. And I found that many times we have passions for things that build up monuments of nothingness. We have passions for watching TV. We have passions for sitting and watching sports. We have passions for pretty much just looking at a bunch of gossip stuff. We have a passion for saying, how dare that person do this? We have a passion of just looking at Facebook at dumb cat pictures. We have a passion for just looking at, this thing can come out in the next few years to do this magical thing that we can already do now, but with 5% more efficiency. We have a passion to do a bunch of pacifying things that do not move us forward. And for you to even say, I listen to this podcast, that's more work than 85% of the heroclix community base will ever do. You have to understand that. But even to sort of take it another step forward of applying what's being said, not just a hearer of the words, but a doer of the words. If you're going to do that, then you have to take some action. And again, expectation, debrief, expectation, debrief, expectation, debrief. The community aspect is essential. Does that mean that you don't have time alone to think and work things out? No. But getting other folks there helps you have accountability, helps you have discipline, helps you move forward when it gets tough. Because I will tell you, buddy, keeping it 100. If I didn't have Wes on me, I didn't have Mace on me, I would have done at least 20 less hours of meta talk and playtesting in the last 2 weeks. That is 20 hours less of growth. That's 20 hours less of understanding. That's 20 hours less of breaking down teams. That's 20 hours less of building teams. That's 20 hours less of understanding the intricate mechanics of several high power teams in the meta. How much does that set me back? But I have other people to push me on. I will be honest. I am hella lazy at times. Hella lazy. And my moments of building monuments of nothingness is knowing at times when I need to record this podcast or edit the quarry or go look at my investment stuff or go and lift my weights, which I do more frequently now, or do my crunches. I just sit and play League of Legends. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to work on my active decision making, which does help, but there's only so much I can work on it. And then I end up raging a little bit because of the douchebags on my team doing stupid stuff. So I fully understand. But when I start looking at when I take action versus when I take passive actions, I'm like, man, if I just stop this passive crap, I would be insanely good, insanely great. But, it's like, man, okay, I'm probably A class, about A plus class. And I see like, yeah, I could be in that S class group. But again, it requires work. And I'm like, okay, I'm hitting my A plus. And then that S class is like, oh, I see it is glowing. I see the light, but I feel like I'm 100 meters off. I'm close, but not quite there, but I'm tired and I'm pissed off and I'm frustrated, and they see the golden city and I'm so close, but I'm tired. And I understand that. But with that, when I come back and I tell you that breadth between first and second, first and fourth is very small. Very small. What is an extra hour? What is an extra 5 minutes? What is an extra calming session? What is an extra relax session? What is an hour of watching TV? What's an hour of playing League? What is 20 minutes fiddling with my phone? I personally had addiction to a phone game called Skydoms, and it was like Pokemon meets Candy Crush. And I was in it, hardcore in it, trying to get the freaking special dragons that drop. And the only way you get the dragons is through the special missions. I was on it. I was beating people in PvP and on my phone. I was like, yeah. And then I started to realize my neck was hurting. My back was hurting because I'm looking down at my phone for multiple hours at a time. I was physically hurting myself, but I was addicted to beating these things. These little moments that add up. I'm like, at work, I was thinking about heroclix, and now I'm thinking about Skydoms, because Skydoms stimulated some new addictive part in my brain. And it's like, yeah, I'm winning. I feel good. I feel self-gratified. Yeah. And then I just hit a point where I'm like, Edward, you need to uninstall this program, or else you're putting in jeopardy your whole entire season for a rock. I'm like, ooh, yeah, I am. So I uninstalled it. Now, I had put in a month. Imagine if I put in 6 months, how much harder that would have been. Or a year into that game, how much harder that would have been. So these little small things can be utterly devastating. And I look about how much time I spent on Skydoms, at least 90 hours. At least. At bare minimum, 90 hours. Now ask yourself this. What if Dark Logos has spent that 90 hours playing Skydoms and spent half of that, not even all that, half of that thinking about heroclix? What could we gotten in a podcast? What could have little different insight we could have gotten? More so, how much better of a player would he be? How much better of a competitor would he be going into World Cup? Or even more so, going into next year's World Championships? What sort of things content-wise, could he deliver and repackage for us? Would he have finally worked on the blog, like you said, for like the last 2 months? All these little things add up, but we don't see them because there's no timer on life. There's no achievement section where you can pull up with your personal stats and see, oh yes, I spent 3,000 days on the toilet. I spent 400 days drinking water. I have spent a total amount of time surfing the internet of 15,000 days. Like you don't see stats like that. of your life, which sort of makes taking action seem like a thing that is, oh, I'll put it off. I'll put it off. I'll put it off. Because when we start weighing, when we don't take action, when we don't put in our expectations, we don't do stuff, we don't talk with others to refine ourselves, it's just more time passing. Just more time passing. And I'm not saying don't relax. And I'm not saying don't have fun. But I am sort of saying be mindful of these things. If you are pushing towards something, what are you pushing towards, and what are you putting in you to keep pushing you towards that thing? And then after you've reached that country, what's the next country? Like I even told folks, and I've said this on the show before, you can climb up to the top of some magical heroclix mountain, go meet a whole bunch of world champions there, have a great conversation, look at, the average player still sort of, putting up the mountain. And then you realize that as you're standing on top of the mountain, all the other heroclix champions are going down the mountain to a different mountain. And then you're stuck there wondering, why are they going down the mountain to a different mountain? Because that country, that mountain, that perspective, that view has been obtained, soaked in, internalized. Transformation has occurred. Time to move on. When people relegate themselves to past victories and they see that as the summation of all of their work, and that is it, and there is nothing more, then that is when decay and death and entropy sinks in. It just does. And that's why you will see great players gradually become weak players. They used to be somebodies. Then they didn't have challenges. Then they saw no reason to excel. And eventually they realized that they didn't have to put in effort, but other people put in effort. And eventually the 3-0s turn to 2-1s, and there's a good season of 2-1s and occasional 3-0s. And then those 2-1s turns into a random 1-2 now and then, but more consistent 2-1s, but they don't care. And then 1-2 starts to become a little bit more of a reality. And the 3-0s seem like the glory days, and the 2-1s seem like, okay, if I sort of pushed, I could get back to 2-1, but they don't quite want to get there, and they get lucky here and there. And then finally they sink into 1-2 and 0-3, and then they say the game's not fun anymore because they're losing. And then all of a sudden they leave. They collapse. They die. They sell all their stuff at reduced prices and walk away from the game because they didn't realize a key element about anything. If you want to get better at anything, you have to put in work. Whether that work is internal, whether that work is external, or a combination of the two, you have to put in work. You fail to do so, there's going to be problems. There's going to be problems. So, I'm saying all this from firsthand knowledge, firsthand experience, and I fell off on games. I fell off on heroclix for bits and times in life. There's points where I truthfully just wanted to give up because it was just so frustrating, because the challenge that I felt of getting to a point of being a good player was astronomical. And so much so, I remember back when I started, in the first few months of playing, what solely drove me was my love of the characters. And I was playing a chess-like game with superhero characters. And I had my statesman, and my statesman was my staple figure. And yes, he sucks so hard. But what astonished me was that I'm fighting against characters that are people running Ultimates Thor, Ultimates Iron Man. And I finally got my Ultimates Hawkeye so I can attempt to fight back. And there's points where it was just frustrating because, the people I was playing against had con artists and other cheapo perplex figures. And I had expensive Vertigo, really. And it wasn't even like rookie Vertigo. It was like experienced Vertigo. Okay. And I'm frustrated at myself. I'm angry. I'm like, this isn't fair. I can't just come in there and compete. But then I'm just like, no, I'm going to keep going. Then I'm struggling with powers. I'm like, no, I'm going to keep going. And then when I'm still new, I stretch out and I'm like, well, I read online on the WizKids forums that they're going to have a big tournament in Topeka. So I'm going to drive to Topeka to play. And let alone, like, at that time, I may have won 2 tournaments at my local venue. And I decide to go to a pre-release to play and try to enter a big tournament, to try to win in a big tournament. And then realizing that all of the work that I did before the pre-release, understanding my characters, understanding what they did, looking at the rulings, looking at the constructed element, what the common teams were, what was everybody looking at, play testing at home, and just trying to figure out, with what I had, what could I do? What can I do? Let me try this. No, what about that? Let me maneuver this in this way. Let me massage this way. Oh, this gets over that. And I got Black Queen and she has Psychic Blast. And so she's able to deal with Ultimate Thor. And then I have this figure and I have that figure and I put them together and I use this feat and that feat. And I think I can do it. I think I can do it. And I beat my opponent in the first level of out rounds, and I lose to something I never see before, which was Power Cosmic Silver Surfer. Never saw it before. But think about this. If I thought, woe is me, I only won 2 games. I can't go to a big tournament. They'll just beat me up. I've only won 2 local tournaments. These are a lot more experienced players. They're going to beat me up. And then they're going to laugh at my team design. And then I'm going to feel bad. And I'm going to go home. And then when I go back to my local venue and I tell them my story of failure, they're going to laugh at me and say, oh, new guy, you tried. Ha, ha, ha. Now go back to your loser corner and go and lose to us as we play more games. If I had that mindset, you wouldn't be listening to me now. Heck, even more so, you probably wouldn't have heard anybody that is good at anything if they didn't want to go out there and face challenges and deal with disciplines. So I know as School of Rocks, did the song say, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. Same thing for anything else. It's a long way to the top, but don't be content on the top. Don't try to go there alone. You're going to need help. So, all right. So I hope today's show helped you out a lot. Definitely let me decompress some things that have been going on lately. If you want to get in contact with me and follow me on the Twitters, you can follow me at StartOverPod. It came from outer space and told me, man, you need to get a little bit more discipline. You can follow my random musings definitely there. You can see, other cool stuff whenever I put it up. Mainly me talking about salsa nights and other stuff from time to time. I'm telling you, my goal when I go to Atlanta is to try to find a salsa club. That's Saturday night or Sunday night just to go out and have fun. Yeah. You can also email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com if you wish to opine. Keep it piffy, keep it interesting, keep it awesome, baby. And last but not least, you can check out the blog, startingoverpodcast.blogspot.com, which I'm going to work on. as soon as I finish recording this. And you can donate to the show that way. Everything you donate to the show goes back into the show and making it better. And if you want a t-shirt, in the link below is the TeePublic link. There is a Starting Over Podcast t-shirt. The one with the white box is gone. Behold the permanent new shirt. Long live the new shirt. And you can get a Phoenix Nest shirt if you want to support the team. We get a little commission here and there off the shirts. So, yeah. All right. That's it. Thanks for listening. I know my mom and a few of my friends are like, yeah, so this is where you let your inner preacher out, huh, Edward? And I'm like, oh, gosh, yeah, I guess so. You know, some things you just can't take out of a person. So thanks for listening. And remember, we all have to start over sometime.